2 days, in fact, the fourth day of creation, God arranged the stars in the sky as signs. That's 2 days before he created man to tell his story about what's going to happen to man. And he actually let people know, and educated people. And the Mazzaroth is known. Even in the time of Job, it was still known. And this was all done before the written word, although it was kind of written in the stars. And so gospel is told to early man. And it, to me, every time I think about Old Testament stuff, and I go, yeah, well, I knew about this and I knew about that, and it kind of put a new light on things for me. And I hope it does the same for you. So let's get started and let's go through the Mazzaroth. It's 12 constellations on the ecliptic, and there's 3 deacons for each one. And not only does the constellation itself have meaning, but the stars support that meaning as well as the 3 deacons. So we'll get started right away. Here we go. Okay, starting here on our first constellation is the Mazzaroth. There are 12 constellations, and there are 3 supporting constellations for each one, as I've said earlier. So, but they're also divided into 3 groups, okay? The first 4 are Christ delivers man from the penalty of sin, okay? The next 4 are Christ delivers man from the power of sin, and the last 4, he delivers man from the presence of sin. So, starting out to deliver man from the penalty of sin is the virgin birth. And our first constellation is Virgo. Now, Virgo tells of the virgin birth of the desired son, who would be a perfect sin offering to redeem mankind. It reveals the prophecy of the promised seed of the woman. In the first sign of Virgo, the virgin, we find the truth of the statement given in Genesis 3:15. The sign of Virgo shows a woman holding a branch in one hand and wheat corn seed in the other. So this is pretty simple. Each constellation, and not all of them, but back in the time of early times, pre and post evolution, okay, we had names, and names had meaning. Okay, so the stars, God named all the stars. He knew them, and he knew if any were missing. So we do not have the meaning or the names, the original names of all the stars. That's just a given. They've been lost through time. But there are 4 main stars that we do have names of in Virgo. One is Spica, and that means the seed. And then we have a Zavajava, which means gloriously beautiful. And we have Vinder Matrix, and that's the branch or the son who comes. And then Sebulon, which is an ear of wheat. So we combine all of those, and that helps us tell the story of Virgo. Now we're going to move on to the next group of the supporting constellations, and that's Coma, Centris, and Booty. Now, Coma means the desired or longed for. Okay. And it's now called Coma Berenices. It's been, as we'll see as we go through here, there's been a lot of the constellations corrupted, and that's okay because we have the written word now. But before there was any written word or any man, they only had the constellations, and the Egyptians have corrupted the coma because they changed it to Bernice's hair instead of, but it used to be the Virgin Mother with the infant, um, and that was the consensus for Coma Bernices. But it's been changed to Bernice's hair, which is a legend in Egypt. Has been changed. So uh, if you look at the old the drawings in the book I wrote, you'll see that they're pretty nice, and I were taken from another book, but. But you'll look at what's on screen. Well, what's on screen is the modern version of the constellations. There's added constellations. There's all types of stuff, and things have changed. We'll get to lupus, which was kind of a serpent. Now it's a hare, so it changed. So anyway, we want to go on to the other the two the two more. Centaurus is depicted as a centaur, the torso and the head of a man with the body and legs of a horse, and thus it does the dual-natured being. The Hebrew name for it was Bezach, or Bezeh, which means the despised. So, with that one, we have one star in it that's a major star, Alpha Centauri, and it means the heretofore and the hereafter. So that's kind of interesting because it's dual-natured in its name itself. Okay, and then the next one, the third one, is Bootes, and the constellation Bootes pictures Christ as a shepherd who is coming even through though he has been pierced. And so his staff is in his hand, and the mark of the shepherd, and a sickle adds to the thought of a harvest. So that has three major stars that we know of: Arcturus, the branch or the sun who comes; Nikakar, the pierced; and El Catarops, which is the branch. So that takes care of Virgo, and it's extra. It's three deacons that help tell the story. And so now we can move on to the next one. The next constellation is Libra, and that is the Redeemer and the required price paid. And if you want to look at it, it's pictured in the sky as a scale that's used for measurement, and reveals the price which the Savior would pay in order to buy redemption for man. So with Libra, God is a God of balance. God created a universe that is in balance, but he measures everything and weighs humans on his scale of integrity. The name Libra is Hebrew for Mazzaroth, which means the scales weighing. So in Libra, we have three stars that we know the meanings of, and that's Zubin El Genbubi, or Genubi, and Zebran El Chemala, and Zubin Akrabi. And so the price which is deficient, the price which covers, and the price of the conflict. So this is pretty simple. It just shows how God weighs things. And then after Libra, of course, we have the deacons, which is crux, lupus, and corona. Now, crux is depicted as a cross, known as the Southern Cross. And we cannot see the Southern Cross anymore from our northern latitudes. It was last seen in Jerusalem at the time of the Lord's death on the cross. It just, our ecliptic kind of migrates. And so it's been a long time. So then there's lupus, which Centaurus, in our last group of constellations, the arrow is pointing at lupus. Now, it was originally pictured as a wolf. Corona name is, what it means is crowned. And but it depicts the crown bestowed on Christ. And it's the object of a lot of other constellations and stuff, as we'll see. And the sign shows us Christ's suffering and death, but it ends with his glory. And so anyway, there's only one star that's really, that we know out of all three constellations, and that is Alpaca, the Shining. So there you go. That covers our second main constellation, and all of the ones involved with it is the deacons. Now, for number 3 constellation is a Mazzaroth, is Scorpio, the scorpion, the devil, Satan himself. And it's got a lot of stars in it with meanings to them. And so I'm not going to go through the names. I'm just going to put meanings from now on as star names, or instead of names. And then, so you just take a look at it and you'll see some of these meanings, the wounding, and it's Genesis 3, what is that, 15, I believe it is, or 16, let me look here. 3:15, Genesis 3:15, and it's depicting that scene. So there's Scorpio. It's way down in the south when the ecliptic's almost over the horizon for us. But what a great grouping! Now, next we have the whole group that goes along with Scorpio. So we have the deacons. Ophiuchus, Serpens, and Hercules. Now, Ophiuchus is standing on the scorpion with one foot, and the other foot's about to get bruised by the tail of the scorpion, while he's holding Serpens, another one for Satan, who's reaching out to get the crown from the last group that we saw. And above him, we have Hercules, and he's like the final triumph over evil by Jesus. So anyway, I'll include a few of the star names here too for you to look at. And the Hercules has changed a little bit, so I'll put the older drawings up too beside him for just a little bit to look at. And that's great. Now we're going to move on to the next one. Okay, our fourth group of Christ delivering us from the power of sin or the penalty of sin. Next group is the power of sin, but is Sagittarius. And Sagittarius once again shows the dual nature of Christ in being a horse and an archer shooting an arrow right at Scorpion, Satan himself. And I'll include the stars here. I've included the meaning of the stars that we know in this group. There's several that I'm going to list that we don't know the exact location, but they're just listed. We know they were part of that group. And next, then we go to the deacons. Now, the deacons are quite interesting. Of course, we have Sagittarius, but we have Ara. And Ara is really, really hard for us to see because it's right on the horizon there, maybe a little bit below it. And Ara is an altar of fire going down, represents the lake of fire, the burning lake of fire. And then we have Lyra, which is like pleasant music and stuff. And above Lyra, we have Draco, which is a dragon. And I guess he's going to be thrown down there in that lake of fire, and that's what this represents. And I'll include some of the star meanings here, or I have included. So the ones that I know the location with the constellation. So there you go. That concludes the very beginning, the first four constellations. So we'll move on. Okay, on to our second section, group of four constellations. And Christ delivers man from the power of sin. And that's what the next four constellations represent, kind of the building of the church. And so our first in those four is Capricorn, the sacrifice and life out of death. Now, Capricorn is pictured as a dying goat with a tail of a fish. His head is bowed and his leg is folded, symbolizing the death of the goat. But the tail is amazingly alive, growing and full of life. And in this picture, the seed of the virgin, as the goat is dying, the fish is born into a vigorous new life. And the fish has become the symbol of the church. So it is the primary Christian symbol of the church to this day. So, and Capricorn has four main stars here. The meaning of them: the sacrifice comes, the sacrifice slain, the kid or goat, and the record of the cutting off. So those are the four main stars here in this group. Next are the deacons of Capricorn, and those are Sagittarius, the arrow of God set forth judgment against sin. Okay. Aquila, which is an eagle, that's falling. So the pierced one falling, and Delphinus, the dead one rising again. So there's quite a bit here in these supporting constellations. Sagittarius symbolizes the arrow of God's judgment, justice, really. It pierced his only son, Jesus, and took the place of the guilty man. And then we can go on to Aquila, is depicted as a falling eagle. The eagle is one of the symbols of Christ in the Old Testament. The eagle is consistent with what we've noted in the whole sign of Capricorn. So in the last one, Delphinus, the constellation completes the overall picture of the sign. It pictures a dolphin jumping with from the water full of life, healthy and strong. It tells the story of how the death of the goat gave life to the dolphin. So this is a very important set of constellations when you think about it. Now the stars in Aquila are the wounding, the piercing, wounded, torn, the bright scarlet, and wounded in the heel. And in Delphinus, there's three important stars, meaning pouring out of water, swift flowing water, and swiftly running water. And that would complete our Capricorn, and that completes our Capricorn, and it's supporting deacons. Okay, the second group of has four constellations, and the second constellation is Aquarius, or the living water, blessing out of victory. Aquarius is he's pictured as a great water barrier, a great water bearer, a waterman holding a large water jug from which he pours an endless stream of water that flows into the open mouths of Pisces Australis. Today, this represents a rock that Christ of Christ with the water flowing out of it, and the endless hope and yearning of the church for more knowledge and more atoning and stuff. So if we look here in Aquarius, we'll find that there's three major stars that really help give a meaning to it. And the record of the pouring out, he who pours out, and who goes and returns. So the meaning of those stars are all add to Aquarius. Next, we have the deacons, and when Pisces, Aquarius, Australis, the living water received, Pegasus, the soon return of the Redeemer, and the sure return of the Redeemer is Cygnus. So those three constellations certainly support Aquarius. Pisces, Australis represents the church sitting at the feet of the water bearer of Christ. The mouth of the fish seems to always be open, drinking from water that is endlessly coming from the water jug. Church is always thirsty and seeking to drink more. The constellation's been changed a little bit. I'll put up the old drawing and you can see the difference. But it's still fairly valid. Depends on how you look at it. And I'm using, in this presentation, modern drawings. So I'll put up the older one. Now, Pegasus is depicted as a flying winged horse that dominates the northern sky in the fall. It begins to tell the story of the second return of the seed of the Virgin to meet its bride, the church. And then the third constellation, Cygnus, is pictured as a swan flying across the heavens. The stars of Cygnus are positioned in the form of a cross, and I know it as the Northern Cross when I look at it, and Cygnus also. However, The ancients always pictured it as a swan. And Cygnus, who comes and goes in Latin. So the main stars here, Pisces Australis, has one Formula Hut major star, and it means the mouth of the fish. Now, Pegasus has a few stars here, meaning the returning from afar, who carries, the branch, and who causes to overflow with joy. And then Cygnus has a few stars also. The Lord comes, flying quickly, who returns as in a circle, who returns quickly and shining forth. So that takes care of our sixth constellation overall and our second in our second grouping. Okay, ready for our third grouping of the second group, or our third of the second group is Pisces, the liberator, deliverance out of bondage. The sign of Pisces teaches a side of the truth on the blessing and salvation bestowed. Two fish are not free and drinking in the fullness, but are bound and held securely by a strong band. This band is tied around the tails of both feet, and in the center, the band is fastened to the neck of Cetus, which we'll find in our next grouping. He's a monster of the sea, and the fish are restrained from freedom and blessing by being tied to the sea monster. Now, there are some important stars in Pisces with the following meanings: united, the band bridle, upheld, coming quickly, the redeemer, and who brushes or breaks. So that's kind of a lot of information there. In our deacons, we find the band, okay, the redeemed bond is ties, which we've already talked about, tying the two fishes together by their tails. And the redeemed in bondage and affliction would be Andromeda, and Cephas is the deliverer coming to rule. Now, the band is simply a cord that ties the two branches of the universal church together. The chains and ties of the world are still felt in this world by his church until he releases us from destroying the evil one. Andromeda is depicted as a woman in chains, the bride of Christ. The chains are around her feet and wrist, and she is the church in misery and distress. She is the bride of Christ, waiting for her king to come and release her of the entanglements and evils of the present world. Now, Cephas, the glorious king, is located at the very peak of the North Pole. He is wearing his royal robe. He is calmly seated as in total control, showing great power. He's getting ready to celebrate. He is our Savior and our King. So that completes the Pisces and its deacons. Our fourth constellation in the second group is Aries, the crowned lamb, glory out of humiliation. The name Aries, which means sheep, gentle and merciful, and also in different languages means the lamb, and in the ancient zodiacs, it had a circular crown on its head. And now in this modern one we're looking at, it's standing up and it's instead of kneeling, and but it's still a sheep. And and it's the Lamb of God who the sacrifice of himself takes away sin, but now reigns as King of Kings. Now, there's some important stars in Aries. One, the wounded or slain, bruised, wounded, or slain, the bound, the head of the sheep, and high lifted up. So that's, basically tells the story. And so anyway, let's move on to the deacons. The deacons get kind of interesting. Cassiopeia, okay, who's the bride. And then there's Cetus, that's that the enemy subdued and bound. It's our sea monster that was holding that band in the last group of the Pisces there, and the breaker delivering the redeemed. So which is Perseus, and which is a really great constellation, holding the head of the enemy, and they're just triumphant like crazy. Now, Cassiopeia is the after picture of Andromeda. She is now freed and beautifully prepared to become the wife of the king. It is clear that she is the bride of Christ, the chosen people of Israel, and is believing church grafted into this religious line of the Jews. So this is a prophecy of things to come as seen in Revelations. Now, Cetus, this constellation represents Satan, of course, and shows that he is now the one chained and thrown down out of his position because he was a rebel against God. And Perseus, that's the Messiah, the one that defeats the enemy. He chains and binds him in hell for 1,000 years. And this is the one that, this whole thing tells quite a story. So, and the important stars here in Cassiopeia are the branch and the freed or liberty. In Cetus, rebel Lucifer, the rebel Satan, bound or chained enemy, and the overthrown. And in Perseus, who helps, who carries away, who breaks the demon or head of the adversary, which is that head hanging out of his hand there. So this would be our fourth out of the second group. So and we'll get to the next group very soon. This is the third and final section of 4 more constellations where Christ delivers man from the presence of sin. And it's really a fabulous section. It's all prophecy for us, but the whole thing was prophecy for early man. So let's get started. Taurus, the judge, his glorious coming. Okay, Taurus is a sign of the coming judge and the coming judgment. It is the day of vengeance of our God, and is the day of wrath from which the Lord's people in his age shall be delivered. So it's an important one. There's 4 important stars involved in this. And the wounded, the congregation of the judge, the governor or leader, and belonging to the judge. So those are the 4 meanings of the stars. And it's quite a constellation. Taurus was originally like if you go back to the meaning unicorn or ox, and so they had different things. So yeah, just something to think about. So yeah, let's move on to the deacons of Taurus. Okay, the deacons of Taurus is Orion, the great and glorious man, Eridanus, the river, and Agura, the shepherd. Orion, the constellation, is pictured as a mighty hunter with a large club, but he's holding the skin of a lion in his left hand that he'd killed. So this is Jesus, and he's killed a lion. He's showing how he's overcome a lion. Now, Eridanus, the name means the river of the judge. It gives symbolism to the possibility that the river comes out of the foot of Orion, the judge. Orion oversees the river of fire that flows down to the lake of fire. He'll place those that are found guilty of rebellion against him and causing others to sin and rebel as well. The third constellation, the third deacon, Agura, shows the amazing picture of how God will protect his people in the time of judgment. He is a shepherd holding a mother goat who has just given birth to 2 kids. There's no fear of harm. The goats are totally safe in the shepherd's arms. So we start taking the star meanings, and there's a lot of them, so I'm just going to post them. But they're the coming of the branch in Orion, and his foot, regal, the foot that crushes. There's just so many meanings here, and they all follow along with what I've told you. So anyway, we'll stop there and we'll move on to our next constellation. Our next constellation, Gemini, the twins, symbolizes the dual nature of the Messiah, suffering servant and conquering king. The twins are 2 human figures together in a loving closeness. This also portrays the marriage of the Lamb. Castor, also called Apollo, means the ruler or judge. It also reveals Christ's 2 appointments. He tells us Christ comes twice. The first time to labor and be wounded and bruised, then he returns to fight and crush his enemies. Now the important stars there are several. The meanings are the ruler, judge, bearing branch to labor and suffer, afflicted, wounded, treading underfoot, the branch spreading, the palm branch, and the seed on the branch. So that's just a simple Gemini. And we move on to its deacons. Now the images that we see on the screen here are not what the old original images are. In fact, all 3 deacons have been changed. Lepus has been made a rabbit, and when it was a serpent. And Canis Major and Canis Minor have been changed to be dogs, and they're not. They weren't originally. So I'm just going to go ahead and put up the old drawing so we can see there. Let's start with Lepus. He sits below Orion, and who was to crush the head of the serpent. Most star atlases make it a hare, but the meaning in Latin is names, though it is quite modern. Okay. Lepus is a snake, and they're just we go by the stars, and everything. So, and let's move on. Canis Major. The Greeks changed this picture to a large dog. Fortunately, we have the star names, so we get a clue immediately from the brightest star, Sirius, which means the Prince of Peace. It seems to reaffirm the Gemini figure, who also is the ruler and has the Lord star as Castor. Now, the third one today has become a hunting dog. If we look at the star names, we determine the true meaning of the constellation. And so, they change things, but they can't really change them because they got too many things to change. But it's just the way, it's not important that they changed things today because we have the written word. But so, I mean, that's the whole deal. Everything we're looking at here, it tells a story, and it tells God's story that he wrote 2 days before man. Our third constellation of the final four is Cancer. The protector, his possessions held secure. As you can see in our map, it shows a crab, and it originally wasn't a crab at all. And it doesn't even correspond with the star names or with the deacons. It's a symbol of an Eastern inn. The inn is surrounded by a wall to assure the safety of people and animals inside for the night. There is no certainty that this is even a correct symbol, but the star names indicate that this is much closer than a crab. Cancer in Latin means to hold or encircle, and in Greek the word is the same, and the Egyptians' meaning was cattle-fold. So Arabs, who holds and binds, and Cyranic name was Sartino, which means the same. So anyway, this is, something that's changed. The important stars in Cancer means the holding, sheltering or holding place, and the governor or leader. So I put up the newer the drawing rather than the what the modern constellation is here, and so anyway, that would give us a really good idea of what's going on with Cancer. Now, it has 3 deacons. One's not shown. That's Argo. Okay. But let's start out with Ursa Minor. Now, we call out the Little Dipper, the Little Bear. Neither one is right. The root meaning of the Greek of this sign is the stronghold of the saved. So you could take a look. Look at the star meanings. I put up the old drawing, and look at the star meanings. They tell the story. Ursa Major, it's not a big bear or the plow or the Big Dipper, okay? But it shows us the people of God long scattered and gathered together in the last days. It's, like a big field or meadow with a shepherd there. So that's Ursa Major. And and then Argo, a company of contemporary travelers, and like the other signs of Cancer, it is a prophetic picture of the safe arrival of God's people. And you could see by the names, it's just too far out of field for me to pick it up and show it in any of the drawings. It just way out there, but it's a big ship. It's safe travel. So there you go. So that takes care of the deacons. And we'll move on to our fourth and final one in just a moment. Leo, the Redeemer's consummated triumph. His enemies destroyed. That is our 12th and our fourth of the third group of the constellations. And it is a glorious picture of Leo, the Lion of Judah, and completing his last act in the magnificent story of salvation. With the wrath of God being poured out as Leo, the Lion of Judah, comes to pounce on the head of the serpent. So with that, there's some important stars in Leo. Treading underfoot, the judge who comes, the exaltation, shining forth, the deceiver torn to pieces, accursed, raven, the raven tearing to pieces. So a lot of things that are involved here in our final group of deacons. Now, I'm using the newer drawings because they haven't been changed that much. Okay, they've added a little sextant in there and other constellation stuff, but they really haven't changed the constellations that much. So our deacons of Leo are Hydra, the old serpent destroyed, Crater, the wrath of God poured out on the serpent, and Corvus, the devouring of the old serpent. So Hydra is the largest constellation in the sky, covering over 100 degrees, and is the symbol of evil that has reached his end. And the conquering lion, Leo, the Lion of Judah, pounces on him, and this marks the end of the reign of sin and death and the end of the rebellion against the authority of God. So, and another supporting constellation here is Crater. It's small. The name means the cup. It has no significant stars in it, and it shares 2 stars with Hydra, symbolizing that the two are inseparable. This cup pours the final and dreadful cup of wrath that is for the devil and his fallen comrade angels. Now, there's one more constellation, and that's Corvus, which means crow or raven. In the end, the Lion of Judah has cast Satan, portrayed by Hydra, into the fiery pit. Once in the lake of fire, the serpent has God's wrath fully poured on him, and Crater and his flesh is entirely torn and eaten by the raven's Corvus. The seed of the Virgin, in the fullness of time, has finished his work of redemption for his creation. And that completes the story of the Mazzaroth as written in the stars by God himself. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll maybe spend some time and study it a little bit. The book that I put together on it is much more complete than my talk here, so I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you. Amen.